Alrighty, so the first midweek action of the 2023 MLS regular season, and there's going to be 13 games that's going to happen on Wednesday. And if you wonder why I'm doing this on a Monday instead of usually on the day before all the MLS game is happening, it's because I'm going to go to one of these 13 games. I'm going to go to Minnesota versus Houston, and I'm going to be going to Minneapolis tomorrow. So that's why I'm doing this preview a day earlier. But we start off with the first game between Atlanta United versus Colorado Rapids, as this will be the first of 7 games that will start at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Atlanta, of course, they are definitely struggling right now. I mean, they have lost 3 in a row coming into this one with a 5-3-4 record, whereas the Colorado Rapids, they did have their unbeaten run came to an end in the last game with a home loss to the Union, and their record is 2-6-4. All-time meeting, 3-0-1 in favor of Atlanta, though Colorado did get their first win against Atlanta in the last head-to-head with a 3-0 win. Then Atlanta won 1-0 against Colorado. Atlanta won 3-0 against Colorado. And then Atlanta winning 1-0 against the Colorado Rapids. And it's safe to say that this is a game that, for Atlanta, they need to win this because, the pressure is definitely mounting on Gonzalo Pineda and even Carlos Bocanegra, too. I mean, we talk about those pair as right now probably being the most hated members of this Atlanta United team by their fan base, and with each losses, yeah, the pressure is going to ramp up to a point where we could maybe see some changes in the coaching and even in the general manager for this Atlanta United team. So yeah, we'll see whether or not if they can snap out of that losing streak, and a good opportunity to do so because they're facing against a Rapids team that they have had success. And not to mention, I'm going to mention this a couple of times in this preview. Whenever you have a team that had to go all the way across the other side of the country on a short rest, it's always going to be very difficult to trying to get a resort. So yeah, this is a game for Atlanta. They desperately need to win, and we'll see whether or not that's going to happen. The next one, we got Charlotte versus Chicago. So this game is kind of an interesting one because the last 2 head-to-head meeting all ended with a 3-2 win by the road team. In the last game, it was Charlotte winning 3-2 against Chicago, and then in the first ever meeting, it was Chicago winning 3-2 against Charlotte FC. Charlotte, of course, 4-3-5, and quietly, Charlotte has started to have a or start to turn around their season. I mean, we know that they got off to such a bad start of the season, but recently they have definitely got them their acts together, and their win against Atlanta United in the last game, probably the most impressive one so far this season. Whereas they face against a Chicago team that, again, that new head coach boost is definitely shown in the last game under Frank Copas with a 1-0 win in the last one to propel this Fire team to a 3-5-3 record. And as I mentioned, both of these teams have won once, and it was a 3-2 win. So we'll see whether or not if we're gonna be in for a goal fest. I mean, there could be a chance to do so. I mean, both of these attack has been pretty good in the last couple of games, and defensively, that maybe could be a question for both of these teams. So yeah, we'll see whether if it is going to be another goal fest. Speaking of a goal fest, on the next one we got FC Cincinnati versus Montreal. So when you look at the last 3 out of these 4 meetings, it's been nothing but a goal fest. I mean, as we'll talk about in the last 5 head-to-head matchup, there's been a lot of goals. That's been featuring some crazy things that have always happened whenever Cincinnati meet Montreal. But Cincinnati, of course, currently tie in first place with a 7-3-1 record, while Montreal 5-0-6. And this is another team that has just completely turned around their season. And again, everybody wrote Montreal off a couple of weeks ago, including myself, and Hernan Losada responds by getting this team now I believe in a 4-game winning streak. All-time meeting, it's a 3-1-3 all-time meeting with both teams getting 3 wins and 1 draw, and this is where I talk about the craziness that we've seen in the last 4 meetings between both of these teams. Last time both of these teams meet, it was a 4-3 win for for Montreal, and then Montreal won once again 4-3 against FC Cincinnati. I mean, it's crazy the fact that in 2 meetings it's the same score, and it's basically by the same team. Now, before that, it was a more moderate 0-0 draw between both of these teams. But then before that, it was a 5-4 win for Montreal, and then a 2-1 road win that FC Cincinnati has against Montreal. Now, I have a feeling we're probably not going to be for a goal fest in this one, because that's not how both of these teams have looked this season and make them great. I mean, Montreal so far this season, and really their turnaround has a lot to do with the fact that they've been playing much better on the defensive front. I mean, goals goals leakage and also defense was a huge problem for this Montreal team. They were giving up goals at will in the beginning of the season, but ever since they have done a really good job in terms of shutting that down, and that they also have been love to also win by the score of 2-0, because I think that's the last couple of wins that they have. In fact, probably doing this winning streak, all their wins has been by 2 goals to nothing. Now, I'm not sure if they can do so against a Cincinnati team that, again, one thing about this Cincinnati team that's kind of interesting under Pat Nolan is that it's been a very kind of grind out, gritty kind of FC Cincinnati team compared to last season, where it was a free scoring kind of team. Now, obviously, Pat Nolan will admit the fact that he wants to get that team back to a team that is free scoring and fun to watch, and not just kind of grind out 1-0 resort every single game. But yeah, we'll see how this game, of course, will turn out. I won't be surprised that, I mean, as much as there could be some goal, it could be a surprising goal fest. I won't be surprised it could be like the nil game that we saw in between of these kind of crazy game we've seen between FC Cincinnati and Montreal. The next one, we got Columbus versus the LA Galaxy. So for Columbus, yeah, they are kind of been in a bit of a slump in the last couple of games after a couple of games ago where everybody said that, well, it looks like Wilfred Nancy has clearly transformed this Columbus team, and the last couple of games it kind of hasn't been the case. In fact, the last couple of games have been kind of a shade of the fact that there is still kind of a little bit of that Caleb Porter kind of mentality that's still left with this crew team, blowing late leads and unable to put away their chances when they're giving so. But they now have a 4-3-4 record, whereas we play against a Galaxy team that got a huge win against the Quakes last one with 2-3-6 record. All-time meeting, Columbus leads the all-time meeting 18-10-16, and in the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was Columbus winning 3-1 against the Galaxy. Then the Galaxy did win 4-0 at home against Columbus, before Columbus winning 2-0 against the Galaxy. Then the Galaxy won 2-1 against Columbus, and then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. So home teams has been pretty much winning all the matchup in these last 4 head-to-head match, and that, as much as I know that that was a huge win for the Galaxy, and really just probably a saving win for Greg Vanney, because I can't imagine if the Galaxy lose to the Quakes in that one, especially in a humiliating fashion. Greg Vanney probably would be losing his job, but I think at least that win kind of bought him some time. But again, I've said this before, whenever teams come up with big win, how much of a letdown is the team going to have? Because it's great that you beat your rival, but can you follow that? Can you continue that momentum into the next game? And in a game where the Galaxy play against Columbus, who, like I said, they've been in a little bit of a slump. They've been having trouble in terms of finishing chances and also finishing game off. Can the Galaxy maybe take advantage of it and get their second win in a row? But moving on, we got Orlando City versus NYCFC. So this is always an interesting matchup, because these are the two teams that came into the league in the same time, also known as kind of Expansion Bro 2015. But this is also a matchup between two teams that have fan base that have just kind of been pulling their hair out throughout the season. For Orlando, it's mainly because of inconsistency, and for NYCFC, also inconsistency, but just they simply cannot win on the road this year. 4-3-5 is their record, NYCFC, while Orlando 4-3-4. All-time meetings, 7 wins apiece and 8 draws for both of these teams. In the last 5 head-to-head matchup, it was a 2-1 win that NYCFC had against Orlando. Then Orlando won 2-1 against NYCFC and kind of returned the favorite. Then NYCFC won 5-0 against Orlando, and then before that, there was a lot of draws in this matchup. A lot of 1-1 draws in the previous 2 meetings. That was, I think, part of 4 straight 1-1 draw that both of these teams has faced. And if this game does end in a 1-1 draw, I mean, I don't know if that's going to satisfy either fan base. Maybe NYCFC fans, because at least for once, they're able to get points on the road, which is hard to come by. But it's going to be interesting to see how this is going to turn out. And also, I mean, I don't want to say this is kind of a desperation derby, because I think both of these teams, they've been having a so kind of season. Though, if you ask Orlando fans, they feel like they are definitely underachieving consider of the signings that they bought this off season. But it kind of maybe had that little taste of a desperation derby, of both teams desperately need a win so that they can at least get their fan base maybe excited about something, and we'll see whether, of course, that is the case. But moving on, we got the Philadelphia Union versus DC United, and yeah, unfortunately for DC, you knew that eventually they're gonna have to face the Union again, and again last season. I mean, I want to send my condolence to DC fans. I mean, last season was probably a horror show every time they had to face against the Union because of how the fact that the Union probably have the most the biggest ass kicking I've seen it a team does in two meetings in well, yeah, in two meetings in a season that I've seen any team able to hand their opposition. But this game will be actually on FS1, so this game actually kick off about 25 minutes later than well, actually not 25 minutes, but about 16 minutes later than all the 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific game, and that also gotta suck if you're DC fans because you're just praying this is not gonna be like an ass kicking like last year, and you're gonna get embarrassed again on national television, which has happened before. Now, in terms of the all-time meeting, 19-6 and 11 in favor of the Union, and the last five head-to-head matchup. I talked about the ass kicking last season. I mean, it was a 6-0 loss that the Union handed to DC, followed by a 7-0 win against DC. Before that, DC did get a 3-1 win against the Union, but that was a rare win because besides that, it was a 2-1 win that the Union has against DC, and then a 1-0 road win that the Union has against DC. And with the way that the Union have started to look like the Philly Union that we saw last season, yeah, this is not going to be an easy task for Wayne Rooney DC team, and especially they haven't really been doing very well this season on the road. I mean, I don't really have a lot of faith of them getting a win. But honestly, if you're a DC fans, it really doesn't matter if they lose this game. As long as they don't just get absolutely slaughtered like they did last season, I think it's going to consider a win, and we'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. Moving on, we got Toronto FC versus the New York Red Bulls. So both of these teams came off of a derby game, and it was kind of an opposite direction. Where the Red Bulls got a much needed win in their derby against NYCFC. Toronto, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. They got a disastrous Canadian Classic loss against Montreal in a game where they basically show no effort, especially in the second half, and their record is 2-6-4, and that's also the same record for the Red Bulls. 2-6-4 is their record. All-time meeting 21-9 and 10 in favor of the Red Bulls, and the last five head-to-head kind of shows that the fact that the Red Bulls have had TFC's number. 2-0 win that the Red Bulls had against TFC last time both of these teams faced against each other, and then last time both of these teams played at BMO Field, the Red Bulls won 4-1 against Toronto FC. Then it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams before the Red Bulls won 2-0 against Toronto, and then they won 2-1 against Toronto. So yeah, Toronto, it's yeah, they desperately need a win, but this is probably not the opponent that they want to face, and especially again, we talk about how a derby win can really propel a team, especially when you beat your most hated rival, and we'll see whether or not that is the case for the Red Bulls, and also just like what I said about Chicago, they also are kind of had that new head coach boost that's going to be in their favor. So yeah, we'll see whether if that's going to be effect in this one, and also for TFC again. You know, they're also a team, and their head coach Bob Brantley, he's probably feeling the heat now because this team has completely underachieved it this season, and if these losses keep mounting, I won't be surprised we could see a change in that coaching role in the upcoming weeks, and maybe even as soon as this week if TFC get absolutely slaughtered by the Red Bulls in this one. But moving on, we got FC Dallas versus the Vancouver Whitecaps. So this is the first of, I believe, two games. That's 8:30. No, three games. That's going to be at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I basically look at the board over there, and I saw that there's actually two other game. I mean, I know there's one other game that starts at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, and that's the that game is the game that I'm going to be attending on Wednesday. But yeah, all-time meeting 11-8-9 in favor of FC Dallas, and in the last five head-to-head matchup, both of these teams met earlier this season at BC Place. It was a 1-1 draw. Before that, the Whitecaps actually won 2-0 on the road against Dallas before winning 2-1 against Dallas, and then they won 1-0 against Dallas at home before it was a 2-2 draw between both of these teams at Toyota Park, and that, yeah, I mean, this is a matchup that surprisingly Vancouver has been enjoying some success in the last couple of matches, and especially the fact that I think the Whitecaps, even in that loss that they play against the Timbers, I thought they looked really good and looked really threatened, and it's just that if they could have put away those chances, maybe things would have been different. Whereas for this Dallas team, they came off of a big rivalry win against Austin, but you could also say that this maybe is a trap game for Dallas because knowing the fact that they got the Texas Derby and they got that El Capitan meeting against the Houston Dynamo, and anytime when you're kind of in between like two different rivalry in the culprits he has, it is very easy for Dallas to kind of overlook this game and thinking about the next one. So yeah, I think this could be a trap game for Dallas and facing against a Whitecaps team that this season under Vanni Sartini they have performed very well compared to what we saw in the first couple of games. Don't be surprised if Dallas might suffer a loss in the hands of Vancouver in this one. But that being said, I am now going to switch boards and look at the last 5 games to finish off the midweek action of match week number 13. So moving on, in the next match is the game that I mentioned I'm going to attend between Minnesota United versus the Houston Dynamo, and there is no doubt that this is a must-win game for the Loons. I mean, I know I usually don't use the word must-win this early in the season, although we're already past the 1/3 mark, but this team is just heading toward a downward spiral, and the only way for them to end this downward spiral is really against a Houston team that is going to be very depleted coming into this game. Keep in mind, no Bassi and Herrera in this game, and a couple of guys that's still on the IR. Bassi and Herrera, those two I mentioned, suspended in this game because of picking up a red card in the last game against Seattle. But Minnesota 3-3-5, while Houston 4-2-4. And keep in mind, the other reason why I say that for the Loons they have to win this game is because Houston has not had any success on the road so far this season. I mean, they're still looking for their first win and even looking for the first point too, because I don't recall they actually pick up a resort so far this season. And in the all-time meeting, 8-4-5 in favor of Minnesota. And another reason why Minnesota's got to win this is because they have had pretty much dominate the Dynamo in the last 5 head-to-head matchup. They won all the last 5 head-to-head matchup with a 2-1 win last time against Houston, a 2-1 road win against the Dynamo, a 2-0 home win against the Dynamo, another 2-1 road win against the Dynamo, and then a 2-0 win at home against the Dynamo. Now, obviously, in order for the Loons to win this game, you need to score. And I know that sounds very kind of cliche and sounds very kind of uh kind of the third grade level kind of an analysis, but that's kind of what this team has been having problems doing this losing streak, and also occasionally the defense definitely has regressed, especially what we saw last game against Sporting KC, but just they need to figure out in terms of the goals scoring, and that again in this one I'm really also hoping that Adrian Heath will just go with his usual formation, or even go with the 4-4-2 formation. Again, I really did not like how he wrote out a 3-5-2. It just didn't work whatsoever against Sporting KC, and I just hope he doesn't do it in this game. And if he is gonna put two up front, just play the 4-4-2 and don't overthink this, because again, if they don't win this game, the next game is against Portland on the road, and knowing how Portland has been relatively hot, I mean this could get ugly for this team, and they could find themselves near the bottom of the Western Conference if this downward spiral continues. But next up, we got Nashville versus Inter Miami. So talk about a team that was kind of heading through a downward spiral. For Miami, they kind of overcome that with 3 straight wins. But this is going to be another interesting task. And again, so far, what's so impressed about Miami turnaround is that they have played some really tough teams. I mean, that game against New England where they were able to win, I mean, I don't think that anybody thought that was the case. Now, I will say this, though 2 of those 3 wins has come at home, and their road form. Besides that win against Columbus, which was also very surprising, they have not done well so far this season on the road, and they're facing against a Nashville team that is kind of having the opposite of last season, where remember how last season they've done well on the road, but they struggle at Geodis Park. this season, Gilda's part has started to become a fortress. I mean, nope, I don't think anyone has been able to get a win against Nashville when Nashville is playing at home. The only team I know that actually got a point was LAFC, but honestly, that's LAFC. You know that they're probably the best team in the league for a reason. But yeah, Nashville looking to try to get a win and maybe kind of have a bounce back performance because yes, they got a 1-1 draw against DC, but I'm pretty sure Gary Smith was not happy with that performance of how flat that they look, and they really only got a 1-1 draw because of the fact that Donovan Pines just cleared the ball right into Mule, and that thing redirected the back in, and that probably is one of the flukiest and luckiest goal we have seen a team score this season. But in terms of the all-time meeting, 3-2-1 in favor of Nashville, and the last meeting between both of these teams, yeah, Miami fans do not want to remember. It was a 5-1 beatdown at home against Nashville. But they did finally win their first ever meeting against Nashville with a 2-1 win. Before that, it was a 0-0 draw. Then Nashville won 3-0 against Miami before it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. Keep in mind that 3-0 win against Miami was in that playing round when half of the Miami team was end up on the COVID protocol list. But yeah, again, this should be an interesting one. Again, Miami, they have definitely played much better and they're on this winning streak, but can they continue and surprise people by facing against a Nashville team that again, they've been untouchable so far this season at home. Moving on, we got RSL versus the Portland Timbers. So this is a rematch of the decision day game between two teams that were battling for the last spot to make it to the playoffs in the West, which RSL was able to win that game and made it to the playoffs. But in this one, RSL 3-2-6, and all of a sudden they're starting to kind of struggling a little bit, just like what we saw back in April. Whereas they face against a Timber side that is just red hot ever since they got that Cascadia Derby win against the Seattle Sounders. This is the only 9:30 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 p.m. Pacific game of this midweek. And in terms of the all-time meeting, 15-9-13 still in favor of RSL. And in the last head-to-head meeting, I actually didn't wrote the last head-to-head meeting. But it was, or actually, I did. It was RSL winning 3-1 against the Portland Timbers, even though I think was it a 3-1. I remember that decision day game being a 1-0 thing scoreline instead of being 3-1. I might be wrong though. But prior to that, it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams, a 2-0 win that the Timbers had against RSL, a 3-1 road win that the Timbers had against RSL, and then the Timbers absolutely put a beat down on RSL by winning 6-1 in that game. And that, yeah, this is kind of a game where I will say that even though RSL has kind of struggled in the last couple of games, it's not because of lack of chances. It's not because they haven't play well. It's just mainly because they just could not put the ball into the back net and have problems in terms of finishing. Now we'll see whether or not if that can be fixed in this game against the Timber side. That, like I said, this Timber side, this all of a sudden is a very dangerous team, and especially their record-breaking man Evander has really started to get hot and started to look like worth every penny of the Timbers paying for that record amount of fees. This could get ugly for RSL if they don't put away those chances like they did against LAFC. But moving on in the next match, and speaking of LAFC, they play against Sporting KC. So this was a matchup that I think a couple of weeks ago you would have said that it would be a very one-sided affair. But as what we saw in that game between Seattle and Sporting KC, I would also kind of would say that maybe for LAFC they got to be careful not to overlook Sporting KC because Sporting KC, I think it shouldn't be come with no surprise that as soon as they finally got that monkey off their back and getting their first win. They have looked more like the Peter Vermees Sporting KC that we've seen in But still, they are in the bottom of the Western Conference with a 2-3-7 record. Unfortunately, of course, LA did. The Galaxy did win, so they stay at the bottom of the West. They of course face against LAFC, who I believe they're not. I'm not sure if LAFC is at the top of the West yet. I mean, they're on points per game. They should be at the top of the West, but yeah, right now 6-3-1, and in the last game against RSL, they kind of shows you why they are the best team in the league. Just pretty much play well and and play a perfect road game against RSL in that one. But they're returning home in this one, as this is going to be the first of two games. That's going to start at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, 7:30 p.m. Pacific. But in terms of the all-time meeting, this is where if you're LAFC, you cannot overlook Sporting KC, because Sporting KC has had LAFC number, especially on the road too. I mean, this has been a team that not a lot of teams has had some decent success at Bank of California Stadium, or now it's called BMO Stadium. But Sporting KC has been one of those teams that has had some decent success. Well, at least maybe in the early days. Recently, that probably hasn't been the case, because LAFC did win 2-0 against Sporting KC before a 3-1 win against Sporting KC, a 4-0 win against Sporting KC, and then well, actually, this is where I talk about where Sporting KC had some success against LAFC on the road with a 4-1 beat down, probably the worst game that LAFC had played at home by far, the worst loss that they've suffered at home in their franchise history. But before that, Sporting KC did win 2-1 against LAFC, and like I said, LAFC, they cannot overlook Sporting KC in this one, because with the way that Sporting KC started to play much better, the attack finally looked like they remember how to score goals, and I think that 3-0 win against Minnesota, I think that is maybe a beginning of them finally started to figure it out, and that the drought seems like it is starting to be over. And I won't be surprised they might cause an upset against an LAFC team that, I know they look very good against RSL, but in this league, even some of the best teams do lose some surprising result. And if there is a chance that we could see an upset, this is definitely the game. You could see that it could be an upset, or LAFC is just going to run over people and win like 4 or 5-0 against Sporting KC, like what people predicted did a couple of weeks ago when Sporting KC was just completely broken, and a team that was by past the rock bottom level of MLS. But moving on into the last game, we got Seattle versus Austin. So speaking of a team that is kind of rock bottom, that's kind of what Los Verde is. They still have not won a single game ever since beating RSL on the road, and that was all the way back in April. They face against the Sounders team that they got a nice bounce back win against the Houston Dynamos, and they improved their record to 7-2-3 and are still at the top of the West. But all-time meeting so far, the Sounders have won two of the four meeting against Austin and drawn the other two. In fact, again, Austin still searching for their first win against the Seattle Sounders. Last game was a 3-0 win that Seattle has against Austin before it was a 1-1 draw between both of these teams. Then Seattle won 1-0 against Austin before it was a 0-0 draw between both of these teams. And judging by how things have looked so far, I mean, you would expect Seattle should be able to get the victory, but then you got to remember about that Sporting KC game, and that I'm pretty sure Brian Schmetzer will let these players know that, yeah, on paper they should win, but remember that Sporting KC game of how it looked like that was the case. They need to respect their opponent, and they definitely need to respect Austin FC, even if Austin is struggling right now. And we'll see whether if they can do so, because they respect Austin, and at least acknowledge that, hey, they even though they're having a tough run, they definitely will put up a fight. I think the quality will be enough for them to get them win, because again, one of the most dangerous thing to do is overestimate your opponent, or underestimate your opponent, that is. And I'm pretty sure Brian Spencer is letting the team know that, yeah, they should not be underestimating Austin, even if Austin is struggling mightily in these last couple of games. But there you have it. That is pretty much it for the preview of all 13 of these games as part of the midweek action of match week number 13. Now, in terms of how to do the review, for the first part, I'm thinking of doing probably the usual 8 games, and then the second part will be the five games that I'll do. But part one I will be doing at a hotel, and I will have my small board, so the quality is not going to be good. So I just want to let you know in advance. I mean, you know that is the case whenever I travel on the road. It's not going to be easy. And also, don't be surprised by the time I get to the latter part of the first part of the review, I might be very tired, because it's going to be a long day there. By the time I get back to the hotel, it's probably going to be around like 10:30 ish and 11, and I still have to, of course, watch the highlights of some of those early games. I'll try to watch as much soccer as possible, but yeah, obviously. Well, I'll probably watch the highlights, and then maybe if I'll when I get back to the hotel, I'll have the laptop and keep track of the later game because one of the good thing about being on Central Time Zone is that these later games, of course, will be starting. Well, these later games will start right after when the game between Minnesota and Houston ended. So by the time I get back to the hotel, I'll still maybe catch the second half of this, and maybe even catch the end of this one too, depending on what time I get back to the hotel. But either way, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button, and also as always, let me know in the comments what do you think of these 13 games and your prediction for these 13 games as part of the first midweek action of this regular season in 2023. But until then, hope you guys enjoy this video. If you do, make sure you like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.